Welcome to our exploration of classical theories of everyday life. I'm Dr. Pamela Brown. Today, we'll journey through the foundational ideas that shaped our understanding of how people interact in daily social situations. This chapter bridges the gap between grand sociological theories and the micro level interactions that make up our everyday experiences. We'll examine how classical thinkers like Weber, Simmel, Herbert Mead, and Schutz developed frameworks for understanding seemingly mundane but crucially important aspects of social life. These theories remain relevant today as we navigate increasingly complex social interactions in both face-to-face and the digital environments. These learning objectives will guide our exploration today. We're not just learning abstract theories, but practical frameworks for understanding how social life works. Each theorist offers unique insights. Weber shows us how meaning shapes action. Simmel reveals the hidden dynamics of group size and social distance. Mead explains how we develop our sense of self through interaction, and Schutz demonstrates how we construct our everyday reality. By the end, you'll have a toolkit for analyzing social situations you encounter daily. Classical sociologists are often remembered for their grand theories about social transformation and large scale social change. However, they also developed sophisticated theories about everyday life that focus on the micro level interactions we all experience daily. This represents a significant shift in sociological thinking, from analyzing entire societies to understanding how two people interact at a bus stop, how families navigate dinner conversations, or how students behave in the classrooms. The focus on everyday life doesn't diminish the importance of these theories. In fact, it's through understanding these small scale interactions that we can better comprehend larger social phenomena. Think about it. Every social institution, every social movement, every cultural change begins with individuals interacting with one another in specific situations. The theories we'll explore today provide the foundation for understanding these building blocks of social life. This approach is partially relevant in our current era of social media, remote work, and changing social norms. The frameworks developed by these classical theorists help us analyze everything from text message conversations to Zoom meetings to social media interactions. Max Weber represents one of the most influential figures in sociological theory, and his approach to understanding everyday life was revolutionary. Born into a middle-class German family, Weber experienced firsthand the tensions between different worldviews. His father was a bureaucrat focused on practical politics, while his mother was deeply religious and concerned with spiritual matters. This tension between the practical and the spiritual would influence Weber's entire theoretical approach. His personal struggles, including a nervous breakdown that kept him from academic work for several years, gave him unique insights into the human condition. When he returned to scholarship, he brought a deeper understanding of human complexity and the importance of meaning in social life. His contribution to everyday life theory centers on his existence that we cannot understand social action by simply observing behavior. Instead, we must understand the meaning that actors attach to their actions. This was a radical departure from the positivist approaches dominant during his time, which sought to study society using methods borrowed from the natural sciences. Weber argued that human beings are fundamentally different from physical objects because they create meaning, and any analysis of social life must be accounted accounted for this meaning-making process. Verstehen is perhaps Weber's most important methodological contribution to sociology. The German word literally means understanding, but Weber gave it a specific technical meaning that transformed how we study social life. Verstehen involves a systematic effort to understand the thought processes of social actors, to get inside their minds and comprehend their meanings and motives. While this might sound simple, it's actually quite complex. Weber wasn't advocating for simple empathy or intuition. Instead, he developed Verstehen as a rigorous scientific method. The researcher must systematically study the contextual context of culture, historical background, and social circumstances that shape how people think and act. Consider this. If you see someone kneeling in church, you cannot understand this action without Verstehen. From a purely behavioral standpoint, you might describe it as a person assumes a position with knees on the ground. But Verstehen reveals the meaning. This could be prayer, penance, worship, or even just tying their shoe. The meaning determines whether this is a religious action, practical action, or something else entirely. Weber argued that this advantage, understanding what goes on in subjects' minds, is what makes sociology different from and complementary to psychology and other behavioral sciences. Unlike studying atomic particles or chemical reactions, studying humans requires understanding their internal mental processes and the meanings they attach to their actions. The systematic nature of Verstehen is crucial. Weber wasn't advocating for mere speculation about what people might be thinking. Instead, he developed methods for rigorously investigating meaning through careful analysis of cultural symbols, of his core historical context, and social patterns. Weber's distinction between behavior and action is fundamental to understanding his theory and forms the basis for analyzing everyday life. This distinction might seem simple, but it has profound implications for how we understand social interaction. Behavior occurs with little or no thought. It's largely automatic and unreflective. When you pull your hand away from a hot stove, that's behavior. It's an instinctive response that doesn't require conscious deliberation about meaning or consequences. Much of what we do throughout the day falls into this category: breathing, blinking, automatic responses to stimuli. Action, on the other hand, involves conscious thought processes. It's behavior that has meaning attached to it by the actor. When you decide to study for an exam instead of going out with friends, that is action. You have consciously weighed options, considered consequences, and attached meaning to your choice. The meaning might be, I want to succeed academically, or I need to maintain my scholarship, or my parents expect me to do well. This distinction is crucial for understanding social life because it helps us identify when we're dealing with meaningful social interaction versus mere behavioral responses. Weber was particularly interested in action because it's through meaningful action that we create and maintain social relationships, institutions, and culture. The line between behavior and action isn't always clear cut. Sometimes what starts as conscious action becomes habitual behavior, and sometimes unexpected situations can turn routine behavior into conscious action. The key is understanding when meaning is involved and how that meaning shapes what people do. Weber identified four ideal types of action that help us understand the different ways people can act meaningfully. Remember, these are ideal types, pure forms that rarely exist in isolation. Most real-world actions combine elements from multiple types. Effectual action is driven by emotion and feeling. It's non-rational in the sense that it's not based on careful calculation, but it is still meaningful action because the actor is conscious of their emotional state. Examples include lashing out in anger, crying from grief, or hugging someone from joy. While these actions might seem spontaneous, they still involve meaning. The actor experiences and expresses emotion in socially recognized ways. Traditional action is based on custom, habit, and established ways of doing things. This might seem like behavior rather than action, but Weber classified it as an action because people are conscious of following traditions. When you dress formally for a wedding or bow in certain cultural contexts, you're engaging in traditional action. You're aware that you are following established customs and that these actions have cultural meaning. Value rational action occurs when people act according to deeply held beliefs and values, regardless of consequences. A person who refuses to lie, even when lying would benefit them, is engaging in value rational action. Environmental activists who protest despite legal consequences, or religious individuals who follow dietary restrictions, are acting based on value rationality. The action makes sense within their value system, even if others might view it as impractical. Means in rational action involves calculating the most efficient way to achieve your desired goals. This is what economists often assume when they model human behavior. A student who chooses a major based on career prospects, or a business person who selects strategies to maximize profit, is engaging in means in rational action. The actor considers various means available and chooses the one most likely to achieve their desired end. Understanding these types helps us analyze the complexity of human motivation and recognize that people can act meaningful in very different ways. Georg Simmel offers a fascinating contrast to other classical theorists. While many of his contemporaries focused on grand social transformations, Simmel was drawn to what might seem like trivial aspects of everyday life: having dinner together, asking for directions, keeping secrets, or even dealing with strangers. He believed these seemingly small interactions were actually the building blocks of all social life. Simmel's background is important for understanding his perspective. As a Jewish intellectual in 19th century Germany, he often faced discrimination that limited his academic opportunities. This experience of being somewhat outside the mainstream society may have contributed to his keen eye for the subtle dynamics of social interaction and his interest in how people navigate social distance and difference. His central insight was revolutionary. Society is nothing more than the sum of individual interactions that comprise it. This might sound obvious now, but it was a radical idea at the time. He argued that to understand society, we must study these micro interactions because social institutions, cultural patterns, and even large scale social changes all emerge from countless individual interactions. This approach made him particularly relevant for understanding contemporary social life. Whether we're analyzing social media interactions, workplace dynamics, or family relationships, Simmel's insights help us see how larger social patterns emerge from seemingly small, simple exchanges between individuals. Simmel recognized that social life can seem overwhelmingly complex. How do we make sense of the countless interactions we have every day with different people in different situations? His solution was to identify underlying forms and types that bring order to the complexity. So, forms of interaction are standardized patterns that we use to structure our social encounters. Think about what happens when you go to a party. You might approach someone and start talking, but this simple interaction could take many different forms. You might be making a quote request for information, asking where the bathroom is, attempting to start a relationship, introducing yourself to someone who's attractive, or engaging in polite socializing, which is making small talk with your host or relatives. So these forms are learned through socialization and are culturally specific. What counts as appropriate party interaction varies dramatically across cultures, time periods, and social context. The forms provide structure and predictability. They help us know how to behave and what to expect from others. Types of interactants serve a similar function, but focus on categorizing people rather than the interaction. We use types to quickly assess how we should relate to different people: the stranger, the friend, the family member, the authority figure. So each type comes with its own set of expectation and appropriate forms of interaction. Simmel's insight was that we develop these forms and types because we need them. Without them, every social encounter would require us to figure out from scratch how to behave and what to expect. Forms and types provide the shortcuts that make social life manageable. This concept is particularly relevant in our current era of expanded social networks and digital communication. We're constantly encountering new forms of interaction, so texting, video calls, social media, and new types of relationships, online friends, professional networks, digital communities that require new social scripts and categories. Simmel's analysis of group size represents one of his most brilliant and enduring contributions to sociology. He discovered that the simple addition of one person to a two-person group creates fundamental changes in social dynamics that have implications for understanding all human organization. The dyad is unique among all group forms. In a two-person group, there is no group structure independent of the two individuals involved. If either person leaves, the group no longer exists. This means each person retains a high level of individuality. They can't be outvoted, they can't be overruled by group consensus, and they maintain significant power over the group's existence. So think about a romantic couple, a best friendship, or a business partner. Each person has enormous influence because the relationship depends entirely on both parties' continued participation. There is no group separate from the two individuals. The group is simply the relationship between them. But the triad changes everything. With 3 people, you now have the possibility of an independent group structure that can exist even if one person leaves temporarily. More importantly, new social roles become possible. One person can serve as a mediator between the other two, or as an arbitrator in disputes. You can have a majority and minority position. Coalitions become possible. 2 people can align against the third. This might sound really abstract, but think about concrete examples. Add a third roommate to a 2-person living situation, and suddenly you have house rules, voting on decisions, and complex alliance patterns. Add a child to a couple, and you have a family with roles, responsibilities, and group dynamics that are qualitatively different from the original dyad. So Simmel argues that this transition from dyad to triad represents the beginning of all complex social organization. Once you understand how 3-person groups work, you can begin to understand larger groups, organizations, and even entire societies. The principles of coalition formation, role differentiation, and group structure that emerge in triads scale up to explain everything from office politics to international relations. Simmel's analysis of secrecy reveals his genius for finding profound significance in everyday phenomenon. Secrecy might seem like a simple concept, but Simmel shows how it's fundamental to all social relationships and helps create the complex patterns of intimacy and distance that characterize social life. Secrecy, according to Simmel, is a form of interaction where one person has the intention of hiding something while another is seeking to reveal what's being hidden. So this creates a dynamic tension that shapes relationships. But secrecy isn't just about dramatic situations like affairs or espionage. It's woven into the fabric of everyday interaction. So consider how secrecy operates in normal relationships. So we all have things we share with some people but not others. You might tell your best friend about family problems but not mention them to coworkers. You might share professional struggles with colleagues, but not your romantic partner. So the selective sharing creates different levels of intimacy and different types of relationships. Secrecy serves several important social functions. First, it creates intimacy. When someone shares a secret with you, it establishes a special bond and demonstrates trust. Second, it maintains social distance. By keeping certain information private, we maintain boundaries between social spheres. Third, it allows for social coordination. Sometimes keeping certain information confidential helps groups function more effectively. Simmel also connected secrecy to broader issues of truth and lies in social life. He argued that complete truth-telling would make social life impossible because it would eliminate privacy, tact, and the social lubricants that make interaction pleasant. Some level of secrecy and even deception is necessary for social functioning. This analysis is particularly relevant in our current digital age, where questions of privacy, information sharing, and social boundaries have become central social and political issues. Simmel's insights help us understand why these issues matter so much and how they connect to fundamental aspects of human social organization. Simmel's theory of distance and value provides a fascinating lens for understanding how we assign worth to things in our lives. This theory goes beyond economics to explain psychological and social patterns that affect everything from relationships to career goals to consumer behavior. The basic principle is elegantly simple. Things that are too close to us, too easy to obtain, tend to have little value in our mind. Air is essential for life, but we don't really think about it or value it most of the time because it's always available. Similarly, things that are too far from us and possible to obtain also tend to have little value in practical terms. The stars are beautiful and fascinating, but for more practical purposes, their distance makes them totally irrelevant to our daily lives. So the sweet spot for value creation is in the middle, things that are attainable but only with considerable effort. A trek to Mount Everest base camp is valuable partly because it's challenging but achievable. Learning a new language, earning a degree, or building a meaningful relationship all gain value partly through the effort required to achieve them. The principle applies remarkably broadly. In relationships, people who are too easily available, too close, may be taken for granted, while people who are completely unavailable, too distant, become irrelevant. The most valued relationships often involve some optimal level of challenge. People who are interested but not desperate, available but not clingy. So in consumer culture, marketers understand this principle intuitively. Luxury goods are valuable partly because they require a considerable effort, money, to obtain. Limited edition items create artificial scarcity to increase perceived value. Even in digital environments, games and apps often use this principle by making achievements challenging but attainable. Understanding this dynamic helps explain many seemingly irrational human behaviors and provides insight into how valuable is socially constructed rather than the inherent in objects or experiences themselves. George Herbert Mead represents a crucial bridge between classical European sociology and distinctly American approaches to understanding social life. While his European contemporaries often focused on large-scale social forces, Mead developed a sophisticated theory of how individuals develop their sense of self through social interaction. His background in philosophy influenced his approach to sociology. He was particularly interested in how human consciousness and self-awareness develop. But unlike psychologists who might focus on individual mental processes, Mead argues that consciousness is fundamentally social. We become self-aware only through our interactions with others. Let me repeat that. We become self-aware only through our interactions with others. This was a revolutionary idea. Most people think of the self as something internal and private, but Mead argued that the self is actually a social product. We learn who we are by seeing ourselves reflected in others' reactions to us. A child learns they are funny, smart, athletic, or kind by observing how others respond to their actions. Mead's work became the foundation for symbolic interactionism, one of the major theoretical traditions in American sociology. This approach focuses on how people use symbols, especially language, to communicate, coordinate action, and create shared meaning. It emphasizes that social reality is constructed through ongoing interaction rather than determined by external forces. What makes Mead particularly relevant for understanding everyday life is his focus on the micro processes through which social life is created and maintained. He shows how something as simple as a conversation between two people involves complex processes of role taking, symbol interpretation, and meaning negotiation that create and sustain social relationships. Mead's analysis of the act provides a framework for understanding how human action differs from simple behavioral responses. Unlike behaviorists, who saw human behavior as direct stimulus response patterns, Mead argued that thinking intervenes between stimulus and response, making human action qualitatively different from animal behavior. So the impulse stage occurs when an actor reacts to some external stimulus and feels the need to do something about it. So, like hunger, stimulus is empty stomach, danger, stimulus is loud noise, or social connection, stimulus is seeing a friend. The impulse creates a motivation to act, but in humans, this doesn't automatically lead to behavior. The perception stage involves the actor consciously searching for and reacting to stimuli that relate to the impulse. A hungry person doesn't just grab the first available food, they look around, consider options, and think about what they want to eat. They actively seek information and evaluate possibilities. So, this stage involves conscious thought about the situation and available options. The manipulation stage involves manipulating the object once it's been perceived and selected. This is where humans show their distinctive capacity for complex interaction with their environment. A hungry person might examine food options, consider nutritional content, think about preparation methods, or even imagine how the food will taste. This mental manipulation allows humans to plan and consider consequences before acting. The consummation stage involves taking action that satisfies the original impulse. But even this final stage involves conscious choice and evaluation. The person eats the food, but they also evaluate the experience learned from it and store information that will influence future acts. What makes this framework important is Mead's insight that human thinking intervenes at every stage. Unlike a simple stimulus response model, human action involves conscious deliberation, symbolic manipulation, and meaning creation. This is what makes human social life possible. We can think about our actions, consider others' perspectives, and coordinate complex social activities. Mead's distinction between gestures and significant symbols helps explain how human communication evolved beyond simple behavioral responses to become the sophisticated symbolic system that makes complex social life possible. Gestures are the most primitive form of communication. They involve movements or actions by one party that automatically elicit responding gestures from another. Mead's famous example is a dog fight. When one dog bares its teeth, this automatically triggers a defensive response from the other dog. Neither dog thinks about the meaning of bared teeth. The response is automatic and instinctive. Humans also use gestures in this automatic way. If someone raises their fist at you, you might automatically flinch or prepare to defend yourself. If someone smiles warmly, you might automatically smile back. These responses happen without conscious thought about symbolic meaning. Significant symbols represent an evolutionary leap in communication capacity. These are symbols that arouse the same kind of response in the person expressing them as they do in the person receiving them. Language is the most important example. When I say the word fire to warn you, I have the same mental image and emotional response to that word as you do. We share that symbol's meanings. This shared meaning is also what makes complex communication possible. It allows us to coordinate action, share abstract ideas, and build cumulative culture. When humans develop significant symbols, especially language, they gain the ability to think about thinking, to imagine hypothetical situations, and to communicate about things not immediately present. The development of significant symbols also made possible what Mead called mind, the conversations that people have with themselves using language. This internal dialogue allows humans to rehearse actions mentally, consider alternatives, and imagine how others might respond to their behavior. It is the foundation of both individual consciousness and social coordination. Mead's analysis of the self as consisting of the I and the me provides crucial insights into how each individual personally and social order can exist. This isn't just abstract theory, it explains the psychological dynamics we all experience in everyday social situations. So the I represents the immediate spontaneous response of the self to others, is the incalculable, unpredictable, and creative aspect of the self. The I is what makes you unique as an individual. It is the source of innovation, creativity, and personal expression. So when you have a brilliant insight, make a witty comment, or respond to a situation in an unexpected way, that's your I operating. The I is also what allows for social change. If everyone always conformed perfectly to social expectations, society would be static and unchanging. But the I introduces novelty and innovation that can lead to new ways of thinking and acting. Artists, inventors, social reformers, and even everyday people who find creative solutions to problems are expressing their I. The me represents the individual's adoption and perception of the generalized other. It's the conformist aspect of the self that understands and responds to social expectations. The me is what makes you a functioning social being. It's your internalized understanding of social rules, roles, and expectations. When you dress appropriately for a job interview, speak politely to your grandmother, or follow traffic laws, you are expressing your me. This isn't mindless conformity. It's the sophisticated social understanding that allows you to participate effectively in social life. The crucial insight is that healthy individuals and healthy societies require both the I and the me in dynamic tension. Pure I would be chaotic and antisocial. Imagine if everyone always did exactly what they felt like doing for no regard to social expectations. Pure me would be rigid and stifling. Imagine if everyone always conformed perfectly to social expectations, with no individual creativity or innovation. Most of our daily experiences involve negotiating between these two aspects of self. We want to express our individuality, but we also want to fit in and meet social expectations. Understanding this dynamic helps explain everything from fashion choices to career decisions to relationship dynamics. Symbolic interactionism emerged from Mead's work to become one of the major theoretical traditions in sociology. While Mead himself never used this term, later scholars organized his insights into a coherent theoretical approach that focuses on how people use symbols to create and maintain social reality. The core principle is that humans relate to one another, not only through physical gestures, but also through significant symbols, especially language. This symbolic capacity enables the complex forms of social organization that distinguish human societies from other animal groups. We can coordinate action across time and space, build institutions, create culture, and engage in abstract thinking because we share symbolic systems. Symbolic interactionism emphasizes that social reality is constructed through ongoing interaction rather than being fixed or predetermined. The meanings we attach to situations, Relationships, and even our own identities emerge through social interaction and can change as interactions change. So, this makes social life dynamic and constantly evolving. This perspective is particularly valuable for understanding everyday life because it focuses attention on the micro processes through which social reality is created and maintained. Rather than taking social institutions or cultural patterns for granted, symbolic interactionism encourages us to examine how these larger patterns emerge from countless individual interactions. In contemporary sociology, symbolic interactionism has influenced studies of everything from classroom dynamics to medical encounters to online communities. It provides tools for understanding how people navigate social situations, negotiate identities, and create shared meanings in an increasingly complex social world. Alfred Schutz brings us to perhaps the most sophisticated analysis of everyday life among the classical theorists. Working in the phenomenological tradition, Schutz was fascinated by a question that most people take for granted. How do we make sense of ordinary everyday experience? His background shaped his theoretical interest in important ways. As an Austrian intellectual who immigrated to the U.S. during World War II, he experienced firsthand the challenges of navigating different cultural systems and making sense of unfamiliar social situations. The biographical experience informed his theoretical interest in how people construct meaning in everyday interactions. Phenomenology, the philosophical tradition that influenced Schutz, focuses on understanding how consciousness works, how we perceive, interpret, and make sense of experience. Schutz applied these insights to sociology, asking how people make sense of this social world in their daily lives. His key insight was that what we call everyday reality is actually an enormous accomplishment. Every day, we successfully navigate complex social situations, interpret other people's actions, coordinate our behavior with others, and maintain a sense that the world makes sense. This might seem automatic and effortless, but should show that it actually involves a sophisticated cognitive and social process. Schutz's work is particularly relevant in our current era of rapid social change and cultural diversity. As we encounter new social situations, technology, and cultural patterns, we need frameworks for understanding how people make sense of unfamiliar experiences and construct new forms of social reality. Schutz's concept of the life world is central to understanding his approach to everyday life. The life world is the everyday world in which intersubjectivity takes place, the common sense world where we live, work, and interact with others on a daily basis. Wide awakeness refers to the state of full consciousness and attention that characterizes our engagement with everyday life. So, this isn't the dreamy consciousness of fantasy or the altered consciousness of artistic experience, but the alert, practical consciousness we use to navigate daily tasks and social situations. When you are fully awake, in Schutz's sense, you are actively attending to your environment and ready to respond to whatever situation arises. Natural attitude describes how we typically approach the everyday world. We take it for granted, and we don't reflect much on its basic assumptions. We assume that the world will continue to operate according to familiar patterns, that other people share basic understandings with us, and that our normal way of acting will continue to work. This natural attitude is what allows us to function efficiently in everyday life without constantly questioning basic assumptions. Work, in Schutz's framework, refers to planned physical activities designed to achieve tangible goals. This isn't just paid employment, but any purposeful activity that shapes the physical world to meet our needs. Cooking dinner, driving to the store, fixing a broken appliance, all of these are forms of work in Schutz's sense. Work is what distinguishes the everyday world from dream worlds or fantasy worlds, where our actions don't have real consequences. Experience the total self means that in the life world, we experience ourselves as complete, integrated beings rather than in specialized roles. Unlike in scientific work, where we might focus only on our analytical capabilities, or in artistic endeavors, where we might focus on creative expression, everyday life engages our whole person, emotional, physical, intellectual, and social aspects, all at once. Intersubjectivity is perhaps Schutz's most important concept. It refers to the shared consciousness that makes social life possible. In the everyday world, we operate on the assumption that other people's consciousness works basically like ours, that they perceive the world similarly, that they understand symbols and gestures the way we do, and that we can communicate and coordinate action. It's not something we can prove scientifically. It's a basic assumption that makes social interaction possible. Intersection of personal and social time refers to how individual biography intersects with historical social developments. So, in the life world, what's happening in your personal life connects with larger social events and trends. A 20-year-old today experiences the world differently than a 20-year-old did 50 years ago because they are living through different historical moments, even though they are at the same life stages. This multi-dimensional view of the life world helps explain why everyday life feels both familiar and manageable most of the time, yet can become problematic when these normal conditions are disrupted. Schutz's concepts of typifications and recipes explain how we manage the overwhelming complexity of social life by developing standardized ways of categorizing people and situations. These cognitive shortcuts are essential for functioning in the social world, but they also shape our perceptions and interactions in profound ways. Typifications are the limited number of categories we use to understand and classify people, at least initially. When we meet someone new, we don't start from scratch and trying to understand them. Instead, we quickly assign them to familiar types based on limited information, their appearance, their behavior, social context, or other clues. These types are not necessarily accurate or fair, but they serve an important function. They give us a starting point for interaction. So if you categorize someone as friendly professor, busy store clerk, or fellow student, you have some sense of how to interact with them and what to expect. Without these categories, every social encounter would require enormous mental energy to figure out from the beginning. Importantly, typifications can be modified when they prove inadequate. So if your initial typification of someone as unfriendly is contradicted by their warm behavior, you can revise your understanding. The key insight is that we all use these mental shortcuts, but flexible people are willing to change them when experience suggests they're wrong. Recipes serve a similar function for situations rather than people. They're standardized ways of handling various social situations, much like cultural cookbooks that provide scripts for common interaction. When someone asks, "How are you?" most Americans understand this as a greeting ritual rather than a genuine request for health information, and normally people respond with "fine, thanks" or something similar. These recipes exist for countless situations: how to behave in elevators, how to end phone conversations, how to order food in restaurants, how to express sympathy, how to make small talk. So they provide structure and predictability that make social life manageable. The important point is that both typifications and recipes are learned through socialization and vary across cultures. What seems like natural, obvious behavior is actually the result of complex cultural learning. Understanding this helps explain why cross-cultural interactions can be challenging and why social change often requires developing new typifications and recipes. Schutz's distinction between we relations and they relations helps us understand how different types of social relationships involve different ways of knowing and interacting with others. This distinction has become even more relevant in our digital age, where we have expanded networks of relationships that do not neatly fit into traditional categories. We relations occur when we have direct face to face experiences with other people over time. In these relationships, we come to know individuals as unique persons rather than just examples of social types. You know your family members, close friends, long term colleagues as complex individuals with particular personalities, histories, and characteristics that do not fit neatly into social categories. In we relations, you can modify and refine your understanding based on ongoing experience. If your friend acts out of character, you don't immediately revise your entire understanding of who they are. You might ask what's wrong. Consider whether something unusual is happening or look for other explanations. The relationship provides rich context for understanding behavior. They relations involve relating to people primarily as types or examples of social categories rather than as unique individuals. You interact with mail carriers, store clerks, bus drivers, and in many others primarily in terms of their social roles rather than distinct personalities. You know them as the person who delivers mail or the person at the coffee shop rather than complete individuals. This doesn't mean they relations are necessarily impersonal or negative. They serve an important function by allowing us to coordinate action with people we do not intimately know. You can successfully interact with a store clerk because you both understand the typical scripts and expectations for customer service relationships. The challenge becomes when they relations become too rigid or when we fail to recognize the full humanity of people we know primarily through social roles. Schutz's framework helps us understand why direct personal experience is often necessary for overcoming stereotypes and developing more nuanced understanding of others. In contemporary life, digital communication creates hybrid forms that don't neatly fit into either category. We might have ongoing relationships with people we've never met face to face or maintain contact with distant acquaintances through social media. Schutz's analysis of meaning and motives provides sophisticated tools for understanding why people act as they do and how they make sense of their own and others' behavior. This framework is particularly valuable for understanding the complexity of human motivation and the challenges of interpreting social action. Meaning refers to how actors determine what aspects of the social world are important to them. This is subjective. It involves our own mental construction of reality. What's meaningful to you depends on your background, your experiences, your values, and the current situation. The same event might be highly meaningful to one person and irrelevant to another. A graduation ceremony might be deeply meaningful to the graduate and their family, but it's very routine to the university staff who organize dozens of them each year. Schutz argued that meaning is important, but difficult to study scientifically because it's internal and subjective. We can't directly observe what goes on in someone's mind, and people themselves may not be fully conscious of what makes something meaningful to them. Motives are the reason people do what they do, and Schutz made a crucial distinction between two types: In order to motives are future oriented. They're the goals or ends that people hope to achieve through their actions. When you study for an exam in order to get a good grade or work overtime in order to earn extra money, you're acting based on in order to motives. Because motives are retrospective explanations that look backward to past experiences that influence current behavior. When someone asks you why you chose your major, you might explain it because you had an inspiring high school teacher, or because your family emphasized the importance of that field, or because you had early experiences that sparked your interest. The distinction is important because in order to motives are what actors are conscious of when they are deciding how to act, while because motives become apparent only when we reflect backward on our actions. People are usually aware of what they're trying to accomplish in order to motives, but may not be fully conscious of all the background experience that shape their goals and values because motives. This framework helps explain why understanding human action is so complex. To fully understand why someone acts as they do, you need to understand both their conscious goals and the unconscious background of experiences that shape these goals. It also explains why people's own explanations of their behavior might be incomplete. They may be very clear about what they're trying to accomplish, but less aware of why those particular goals matter to them. The classical theories we've explored today aren't just historical curiosities. They provide powerful tools for understanding contemporary social life. Each theorist offers insights that remain remarkably relevant for analyzing current social situations and challenges. Weber's concept of Verstehen and his analysis of different types of action help us understand everything from political behavior to consumer choices to online interactions. When we try to understand why people share certain content on social media or make particular lifestyle choices, we're engaging in Verstehen, trying to understand the meanings and motives behind their actions. Simmel's insights about group dynamics, social distance, and the stranger apply directly to contemporary issues like remote work, online communities, and global migration. His analysis of how group size affects social dynamics helps explain everything from family dynamics to organizational behavior to political coalition. Mead's symbolic interactionism provides frameworks for understanding identity formation in diverse societies. The role of language in creating social reality and how new forms of communication technology affect human relationships. His insight about the social construction of self are particularly relevant in an era where people manage multiple online identities and navigate diverse social contents. Schutz's phenomenological approach helps us understand how people make sense of rapidly changing social situations, how they adapt to new technologies and cultural patterns, and how they construct meaning in increasingly complex social environments. Together, these theories provide a toolkit for analyzing the microprocesses through which social life is created and maintained, even as the specific context and technologies change. While these classical theories provide valuable insights, it's important to recognize their limitations and the need for critical analysis. Each theory was developed in specific historical and cultural contexts that shape the theorist's perspectives and assumptions. Most of these theorists were writing from the perspective of educated, middle-class European or American men in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Their experiences and assumptions about social life may not apply equally to all groups or time periods. For example, their assumptions about family life, work relationships, or authority patterns may reflect the specific social arrangements of their era rather than universal principles. Contemporary scholars have noted that these theories often pay insufficient attention to differences based on gender, race, class, and other social categories. They may also underemphasize power dynamics, conflict, and inequality in favor of focusing on cooperation and consensus. Additionally, some aspects of these theories need updating for the new digital age. While the basic insights remain valuable, the specific ways that people interact, form relationships, and construct meaning have changed dramatically with new technologies. The key is to use these theories as a starting point for analysis rather than as a final answer. They provide useful frameworks and concepts, but they need to be applied critically and supplemented with more contemporary insights and perspectives. As we conclude our exploration of classical theories of everyday life, it's worth reflecting on the overarching insights that unite these different approaches. Despite their different emphases and methodologies, all of these theorists share a fundamental insight. Social life is not simply given or natural, but is actively constructed through meaningful interaction between people. Weber showed us that human action is fundamentally different from behavior because it involves meaning, and that understanding social life requires understanding the meanings people attach to their actions. Simmel revealed that even seemingly simple social situations involve complex dynamics of association, distance, and group formation that shape all larger social patterns. Mead demonstrated that our most basic sense of who we are, ourself, develops through social interaction and symbolic communication. What we think of as individual consciousness is actually a social product. Schutz explained how we actively construct our everyday reality through cognitive processes like typification and the development of recipes for handling social situations. Together, these insights suggest that social life is more complex and more creative than it might initially appear. Every conversation, every social encounter, every routine interaction involves sophisticated processes of meaning making, role taking, and reality construction. Understanding these processes helps us become more thoughtful participants in social life and more effective analysts of social phenomena. These classical insights remain relevant because they focus on fundamental aspects of human social life that persist even as specific technologies, institutions, and cultural patterns change. The framework they develop continue to provide valuable tools for understanding how people create and maintain social relationships, coordinate action, and construct shared meanings in an ever-changing world. These discussion questions are designed to help you apply the theoretical concepts we've explored to your own experiences and contemporary social situation. For the first question, Weber's types of action, think about decisions you've made recently. Can you identify examples of effectual action driven by emotion, traditional action following customs, value rational action based on principles, and means in rational action calculating efficiency? Most real decisions probably combine elements from multiple types. The second question asks you to identify Simmel's concepts in your own experience. What typification do you use to categorize people you meet? What recipes do you follow for common social situations? How do these mental shortcuts help you navigate social complexity? The third question about Mead's I and me is particularly interesting in the context of social media. How do you balance self-expression, the I, with social expectations and image management, the me, in your online presence? So this tension plays out constantly in digital environments. The fourth question about Schutz's natural attitude asks you to think about times when your basic assumptions about how the world works were challenged or disrupted. This might be actually easy. It might happen when traveling to different cultures, encountering new technologies, or facing unexpected crises. The final question encourages critical thinking about how these classical theories might need updating. What aspects of digital communication, virtual relationships, or online communities challenge the assumption of these early theorists? This exercise will help you see how abstract theoretical concepts can illuminate concrete social experiences. I might say also, you may see one of these during class. So, the classical theories we've explored today provide the foundation for many contemporary developments in sociology and related fields. Understanding these foundational ideas is essential for making sense of more recent theoretical developments and research approaches. Ethnomethodology, developed by Harold Garfinkel, builds directly on Schutz's phenomenological insights to examine how people accomplish everyday social order through their routine practices. Conversation analysis, developed by Harvey Sachs and others, applies detailed empirical methods to study how people coordinate interaction through talk. Postmodern approaches to social interaction challenge some of the assumptions of classical theory while building on insights about the constructed nature of social reality. Digital sociology examines how new technologies are changing fundamental aspects of social interaction and relationship formation. Studies of globalization and cross-cultural interaction draw on classical insights about meaning making and typification to understand how people navigate increasingly diverse social environments. The key point is that these classical theories aren't outdated, they're foundational. So understanding them provides for the conceptual tools necessary for engaging with contemporary developments and conducting your own analysis of social life. As you continue your studies in sociology, you'll encounter many theories and research approaches that build on, critique, or extend the insights of these classical thinkers. Having a solid grounding in their fundamental concepts will help you understand these developments and contribute to ongoing scholarly conversations about social life. So I thank you for your attention during the exploration of classical theories of everyday life. I hope you gained both theoretical knowledge and practical tools for understanding social interaction in your own lives. These theories represent some of the most sophisticated thinking about how social life works at the micro level. While they were developed over a century ago, they continue to provide valuable insights for understanding contemporary social phenomenon. The key is to use them as analytical tools while remaining critical and creative in your application. So I encourage you to explore the original works of these theorists. Reading Weber, Simmel, Mead, and Schutz in their own words provides depth and nuance that the secondary sources cannot capture. You'll also find that different aspects of their theories become relevant as you encounter different social situations and research questions. For those interested in reading further, I've given you a list of key resources, including both classical sources and contemporary applications. The suggested readings at the end of your textbook chapter also provide excellent starting points for deeper exploration. Remember, theory is most valuable when it helps you understand and analyze real social situations. As you go about your daily lives, try applying these theoretical frameworks to understand the social dynamics you observe and participate in. You might be surprised at how much these classical insights can illuminate contemporary social life.